There are prayers you no longer remember praying, not because they were unimportant, but because they became part of the background noise of your life. A whispered sentence before sleep, a quiet "Help me, Lord," spoken while driving to work, a tear that carried no words at all, a sigh so small that even you barely notice it leave your chest. You assumed those moments disappeared into silence. You believed they rose only as far as the ceiling before fading into another ordinary day. But I want you to know something before this message goes any further. Not one of those prayers was lost. Not one. The world measures words by how loudly they are spoken. Heaven has never done that. Heaven has always measured prayer by the heart that carried it. You thought I was listening for perfect sentences. I was listening for you, long before you learned the right words, long before you knew which verses to quote, long before you wondered whether your faith was strong enough. I already knew every hidden corner of your heart. That is why your quietest prayer reached me just as surely as your loudest cry. Some of you listening right now have almost stopped praying, not because you stopped believing, but because you became tired of repeating the same request. You have asked for healing so many times that the words now feel worn out. You have prayed for your family until you no longer know what else to say. You have whispered the same hope into the darkness night after night, until even your own voice sounds unfamiliar. Somewhere along the way, you began asking yourself a question you never wanted to admit. If God has heard me, why does everything still look the same? That question has visited more hearts than you realize. It has sat beside hospital beds. It has ridden home with people after another job interview that ended with polite rejection. It has walked through empty houses after children moved away. It has waited in cars outside apartment buildings because someone needed just one more minute before walking inside and pretending everything was fine. It has lived inside marriages where both people still care but no longer know how to speak without hurting one another. It has rested beside those who smile for everyone else while quietly wondering whether anyone would notice if they finally admitted how exhausted they really are. I have been present in every one of those moments, not as a distant observer, not as someone taking notes from far away. I was there when your hands trembled before making that phone call. I was there when you stared at the ceiling unable to sleep because tomorrow carried another uncertainty. I was there when everyone around you thought you were doing fine because you had become so skilled at hiding your pain. I was there too. You have mistaken my silence for my absence. Those are not the same thing. A seed beneath the soil is silent. That does not mean it is lifeless. Roots grow without applause. The strongest foundations are built where no one can see them. Some of the greatest things I have ever done began in places that looked completely ordinary. A stable, a desert, a borrowed boat, an upper room, an empty tomb before sunrise. People often expect me to announce my greatest works with thunder. Yet many of my miracles begin in whispers. That is why you must not confuse quietness with inactivity. Heaven has never been idle. Even now, while you wonder whether anything is changing, things are already moving beyond what your eyes can measure. There are conversations happening that you know nothing about. There are hearts softening that once seemed impossible to reach. There are doors preparing to open because other doors first needed to close. There are delays protecting you from futures that would have wounded you. There are answers already forming while you are still asking the question. You keep looking for dramatic evidence. I often begin with invisible faithfulness. Think about dawn for a moment. No one watches the sun leap into the sky all at once. Morning arrives quietly. First the darkness becomes slightly less dark. Then the horizon changes almost without permission. The birds begin singing before most people even notice the light. Only later do they realize morning had already been arriving while they were still calling it night. That is how many answers to prayer begin. Not with an explosion, with a slow certainty. With peace arriving before circumstances change. With strength appearing before the battle ends. With hope returning before the breakthrough becomes visible. Perhaps that is exactly where you are today. You have been waiting for circumstances to tell you I am near. Instead, I am inviting you to recognize my presence before circumstances catch up. Because my presence has never depended on your situation. I was with Daniel before the lions became quiet. I was with David before the giant fell. I was with Martha before Lazarus walked out of the tomb. And I have been with you long before the answer you've been waiting for becomes visible. Your story is not being written only in the moments everyone celebrates. It is also being written in the quiet places no one else will ever fully understand. The prayer you whispered while washing dishes. The tears you wiped away before anyone entered the room. The deep breath you took because you refused to give up one more day. None of those moments escaped my attention. Not one. You have wondered whether your prayers were too small, too ordinary, too repetitive, too late, too weak. Listen carefully. The strength of your prayer has never depended on the strength of your voice. It has always depended on the one who hears it. Before we continue, I want you to pause for just a moment. If these words are speaking to your heart, tell everyone in the comments which country you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. Someone reading your comment may realize they are not carrying their silent prayers alone. And if you believe that even your quietest prayer has been heard, write one simple sentence. Lord, you heard me. Stay with me, because in the next part, I want to show you why some of the prayers that feel forgotten on earth are remembered most clearly in heaven, and why the silence you have feared may be preparing an answer greater than you ever imagined. There is something about silence that makes people question love. When a friend stops calling, you wonder if the friendship has changed. When a family member grows quiet, you begin searching every recent conversation for something you might have done wrong. When someone you care about no longer responds, your mind starts filling the empty spaces with fears that were never spoken. Many of you have done the same thing with me. You did not stop believing that I exist. You simply began wondering whether I was still listening. The silence became so long that it started telling a story of its own. It whispered that perhaps I had moved on. Perhaps your prayer was too ordinary. Perhaps there were more important people with greater needs. Perhaps heaven heard louder voices before it ever reached yours. But silence has always been a poor storyteller. It rarely tells the truth. The greatest mistake you can make is believing that because you cannot hear me, I have stopped hearing you. Those are not the same thing. Long before your prayer became words, I already knew its weight. Before your lips moved, before your tears formed, before your heart could even explain what it was carrying, I already understood what you could not yet put into language. There were nights when you prayed with complete sentences. There were other nights when all you managed was one exhausted whisper, Lord. Nothing more. You apologized because you thought your prayer was unfinished. I never did. I heard everything hidden inside that single word. I heard the fear you could not explain, the disappointment you were embarrassed to admit, the hope you were afraid to feel again because hoping had become painful. I heard the questions you believed were too dangerous to ask, and I was not offended by any of them. You have spent so much time trying to sound faithful that you forgot I already know your heart before you speak. You never needed to impress me. You only needed to come. Some of you are carrying prayers that are years old. Not days, not weeks, years. The prayer for a restored marriage. The prayer for a child who walked away from faith. The prayer for healing that still seems unanswered. The prayer for work after sending out application after application. The prayer for peace after a loss that still wakes you in the middle of the night. Time has convinced you that unanswered means unheard. But time has never been the measure of my faithfulness. Think about the farmer who plants a seed. The day after planting, the field looks exactly the same. A week later, it may still appear unchanged. Someone walking past could easily believe nothing is happening beneath the soil. Yet underneath the surface, life has already begun. Roots are reaching downward long before leaves reach upward. The invisible work always comes first. That is one of the hardest truths for the human heart to accept. You celebrate what you can see. I often begin with what no one can. Some of my greatest answers begin underground. Hidden from applause, hidden from certainty, hidden even from the person praying. You have asked me for immediate change. Sometimes I first create invisible strength. You asked me to remove fear. Instead, I quietly began teaching you courage. You asked me to eliminate every storm. Instead, I started building an anchor inside your soul. You asked for a different life. Sometimes I began by transforming the person who would eventually live it. Do not mistake a hidden answer for the absence of an answer. Many of the prayers you called delayed are already unfolding in ways you simply cannot measure yet. Remember Joseph. Years passed between the dream and its fulfillment. Remember David. He was anointed king long before he ever wore a crown. Remember Abraham. He learned that waiting with me is never empty waiting. These stories were never written simply to admire the people inside them. They were written because your own story would one day require the same kind of trust. Perhaps today you feel like you are standing somewhere between the promise and its fulfillment. That place feels lonely. It feels uncertain. It feels unfair. But it is also where faith quietly grows. Not the loud faith that everyone notices. The quiet faith that chooses to pray again after yesterday seemed unchanged. The quiet faith that gets out of bed one more morning. The quiet faith that still whispers, "Lord, help me," even when nothing visible has improved. That kind of faith is precious to me. The world celebrates dramatic victories. Heaven often celebrates quiet endurance. I have seen every morning you chose hope over despair. Every evening you thanked me even while carrying unanswered questions. Every moment you resisted giving up when no one else knew how close you were. None of those moments disappeared. They became part of your story with me. One day you will discover that the seasons you believed were empty were actually filled with my unseen work. You will realize that while you were asking whether I had forgotten your prayers, I was preparing you for an answer larger than your present understanding could contain. So do not measure my love by the length of your waiting. Measure it by the cross, where I already proved that I would never abandon you. And in the next part, I want to show you something even deeper. Why some of heaven's greatest answers arrive only after your heart has become quiet enough to recognize them, and why waiting has never been wasted in my hands. There is a difference between an unanswered prayer and an unfinished story. Many people confuse the two. You have looked at your life and assumed that because the answer has not arrived yet, the story must already be over. But I have never written stories that end in the middle of the page. What feels like the final chapter to you is often only the place where I begin writing something deeper than you expected. You have been counting the days since you first whispered that prayer. You remember where you were when you asked me for healing. You remember the night you asked me to restore what had been broken. You remember the morning you begged me to make a way when every door seemed closed. What you do not remember are the thousands of quiet moments afterward when I continued walking beside you. You remember the request. I remember every step that followed it. There is something the human heart struggles to understand. You experience time one day at a time. I see the entire journey at once. What feels painfully delayed to you is never disconnected in my hands. Every conversation, every unexpected meeting, every closed door, every change in direction, every lesson that felt unnecessary at the time, they all become threads that I weave into an answer you could never have designed for yourself. That is why my timing often feels mysterious. Not because I enjoy watching you wait, but because I refuse to give you something before it can truly become a blessing. Think about a child asking to drive a car. The desire itself is not wrong. The timing is. A loving father does not say not yet because he enjoys disappointment. He says it because love sees what impatience cannot. Some of you have mistaken my protection for rejection. The opportunity that disappeared. The relationship that unexpectedly ended. The plan that quietly fell apart after months of effort. You believed those moments proved I had stopped listening. What if they proved the opposite? What if the very disappointment you have been grieving became the doorway that kept you from a pain you never saw coming? You have often asked me to explain everything before you trust me. Faith has never worked that way. Noah built before it rained. Abraham walked before he knew the destination. Peter stepped onto the water before he knew how the next step would hold him. They were not given complete explanations. They were given enough light for the next step. That is often how I guide my children. Not with an entire map, with enough light to keep moving. You keep asking me to reveal the whole future. Sometimes I simply whisper, take today's step. Because tomorrow's strength is not needed for today's obedience. One of the quietest lies fear ever tells is this. If God were really working, you would already see dramatic evidence. But look carefully at the way I often work throughout Scripture. The widow gathered empty jars before the oil multiplied. The servants filled ordinary water pots before anyone tasted the wine. The disciples handed out bread before they understood there would be enough for everyone. The miracle was already unfolding while everything still looked ordinary. Do not despise ordinary moments. Many of my greatest works wear ordinary clothes before they reveal extraordinary purposes. You have spent so much time looking for the spectacular that you almost overlooked my daily faithfulness. The breath you took this morning. The unexpected peace that arrived for a few quiet minutes. The friend who called at exactly the right time. The strength to keep going when yesterday you thought you could not. Those were not accidents. Those were reminders that I have never stopped caring for you. You have asked me, Lord, where are you? And all along, I have been asking you to notice where I already am. I am in the strength that kept you standing. I am in the mercy that gave you another morning. I am in the hope that refused to completely disappear, even after everything you have faced. I am in the quiet conviction that made you press play on this message today. None of that happened by chance. Sometimes my answers arrive as changed circumstances. Other times they arrive as a changed heart that can finally carry what once would have crushed it. Both are miracles. One changes the world around you. The other changes the world within you. Never believe the second miracle is smaller than the first. There are people who received everything they prayed for and still remained empty inside. And there are others who discovered my peace before their situation changed, and that peace carried them through every storm that followed. That is the gift I long to give you. Not temporary comfort that disappears with changing circumstances, but a confidence rooted so deeply in my presence that even waiting cannot steal it. So if you have been measuring my faithfulness by the calendar, stop for a moment. Look instead at the countless ways I have sustained you through days you never imagined surviving. You are still here, still breathing, still hoping, still reaching toward me. That alone is evidence that my hand has never left your life. And in the next part, I want to show you why some of your quietest tears became prayers without words, and why heaven understands the language of tears even when your voice has nothing left to say. There are moments when prayer no longer sounds like prayer, not because faith has disappeared, but because pain has become too deep for language. You have experienced those moments. The nights when you sat on the edge of your bed and opened your mouth to pray, only to discover there were no words left to offer. The mornings when you stared out of a window, carrying a heaviness you could not even name. The drive home where the silence inside the car somehow spoke louder than any conversation you had all day. You worried that because you could not find the right words, I would somehow misunderstand your heart. But I have never depended on your vocabulary to understand your soul. Long before you learned to pray with complete sentences, I understood every emotion hidden inside your silence, every tear that slipped down your face without explanation, every deep breath you took just to keep yourself from falling apart, every moment you whispered, "I can't do this anymore." None of it was lost. The world often celebrates people who always seem strong, people who always have the perfect answer, people who never appear shaken. But strength has never impressed me nearly as much as honesty. The person who quietly admits, "Lord, I don't understand." The one who says, "I'm trying to trust you, but today feels difficult." The one who simply sits in my presence because there is nothing left to say. Those moments are not signs of weak faith. They are often the moments when faith is most genuine. You have spent years believing that prayer must always sound confident. Yet throughout Scripture, many of the people I loved most brought me confusion before they brought me certainty. David cried out from caves. Jeremiah wept over a nation that refused to listen. Hannah stood before me carrying a sorrow so deep that others misunderstood her silence. Even my son, in the garden before the cross, poured out the full weight of human anguish before the Father. None of these moments embarrass heaven. They revealed hearts that refused to run away, even while carrying unbearable burdens. Perhaps that describes you today. You have not walked away from me. You have simply grown tired. Not tired of loving me. Tired of carrying what no one else seems to notice. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from holding yourself together for everyone else. You smile because your children need reassurance. You keep working because your family depends on you. You encourage friends while quietly wondering who would encourage you if they knew the full truth. People see your routine. I see your sacrifice. They see the finished conversation. I hear the words you swallowed before speaking. They notice the smile. I notice the tears that came before it. Nothing about your hidden life is hidden from me. There are prayers you prayed years ago that even you have forgotten. Yet I remember every one of them. Not because I keep a record to measure your performance, but because love remembers. Think about someone you deeply love. You remember small conversations they are completely forgotten. You remember birthdays, old photographs, the sound of their laughter. Love pays attention to details that others overlook. Now imagine a love far greater than any human heart could ever offer. That is how I remember you. I remember the first time you sincerely called my name. I remember the season when your faith felt effortless. I remember the years when believing became difficult. And I have remained the same through every chapter. You have changed. Your circumstances have changed. Your understanding has changed. But my faithfulness has never changed. Perhaps you have wondered why I did not answer immediately. Why I allowed certain seasons to last longer than you expected. The truth is, many answers cannot simply be delivered. They must be prepared. A tree that grows too quickly develops shallow roots. The first strong wind can destroy what appeared healthy. But a tree that spends years growing beneath the surface becomes strong enough to shelter others. What if I have been growing roots in places you cannot see? What if this season has not been delaying your future, but strengthening it? One day someone will ask how you survived. They will expect you to describe a single dramatic miracle. Instead, you may find yourself telling them about hundreds of quiet mercies, the unexpected peace that arrived one ordinary afternoon, the strength that appeared just when you thought you had reached your limit, the friend who called at the exact moment you needed someone to listen, the scripture that seemed written specifically for your situation. Those moments may have looked ordinary, but heaven rarely measures miracles the way the world does. Some miracles happen in an instant. Others happen so gently that you only recognize them after looking back. That is often how my grace works. Not always loudly, but always faithfully. You keep searching for proof that I have heard your prayers. Look carefully at your own story. The fact that you are still reaching toward me after everything you have endured. The fact that hope has not completely disappeared. The fact that somewhere deep inside your heart you still believe I am good. Those are not signs that I have abandoned you. They are evidence that my spirit has continued holding you, even on the days you felt too weak to hold on to me. Stay with me, because in the next part, I want to show you why some of the answers you are waiting for are already moving toward you, and why heaven often begins changing your future long before your eyes can recognize the first sign of it. One of the greatest struggles of the human heart is believing that something important can be happening when nothing appears to be changing. You wake up to the same routine, the same responsibilities, the same unanswered questions, the same prayers that seem to echo back into the silence. After enough ordinary mornings, it becomes easy to believe that your future will simply be a repetition of your past. That is exactly where discouragement begins to grow. Not because hope disappeared all at once, but because disappointment quietly convinced you that tomorrow would look exactly like yesterday. Yet I want you to consider something. Every season in nature changes long before people recognize it. Winter does not become spring in a single afternoon. The earth begins changing while the trees still appear lifeless. Seed begin responding beneath frozen ground while the surface still looks unchanged. The first signs of new life are almost always invisible. That is how many of my answers begin. You have been asking me for visible proof. I have been doing invisible preparation. You have focused on the destination. I have been strengthening the person who will arrive there. Because an answered prayer is not only about changing circumstances. It is also about shaping the heart that will receive them. Think back over your own life. There were prayers you once believed would never be answered. At the time, every delay felt unbearable. Every closed door felt permanent. Every disappointment looked like the end of the story. But years later, you realize that many of those closed doors protected you. Some relationships that ended became the reason healthier ones could begin. Some opportunities that disappeared made room for better ones you never imagined. Some delays that frustrated you became the very seasons that prepared you for blessings you would have mishandled if they had arrived earlier. You understand that now, but while you were living through it, you could not see any of it. That is where many of you are today. You are standing inside a chapter that will only make sense when you eventually look back. Do not assume that because you cannot explain this season, it has no purpose. Some of the most important chapters of your life will only reveal their meaning after you have already walked through them. Joseph did not understand a prison while he was sitting inside it. Moses did not fully understand the wilderness while he was wandering through it. The disciples did not understand the cross while they stood beneath it. Only later did they see how every painful moment had been woven into a story far greater than they could imagine. Your life is no different. I have never asked you to understand every detail. I have asked you to trust the one who already sees a finished picture. You often think I am only working when something dramatic happens. When the miracle is obvious, when the breakthrough finally arrives, when everyone around you can celebrate the answer. But some of my greatest work happens before anyone applauds. Character is formed in quiet places. Wisdom grows through waiting. Compassion is often born from suffering. Patience develops through delays. Faith deepens when it chooses to trust without immediate evidence. These are not secondary miracles. They are the foundation upon which every lasting blessing is built. Many people pray for a greater purpose, Very few realize that purpose is almost always prepared in hidden seasons. David spent years tending sheep before leading a nation. The quiet field prepared him for the public battles. The lonely nights taught him to hear my voice before crowds ever learned his name. Do not despise your hidden season. The world celebrates visibility. Heaven often prepares greatness in obscurity. Perhaps you have been wondering why your life feels unnoticed, why your faithfulness seems ordinary, why your prayers appear to disappear into silence. Remember this. Just because people do not see what I am doing does not mean I have stopped working. The roots of the tallest trees remain hidden beneath the ground. No one applauds the roots. Yet without them, the tree cannot survive the storm. What I am building inside you today may become the very strength that carries someone else tomorrow. One day another weary soul will ask how you found peace in such difficult circumstances. They will expect a dramatic answer. Instead, you may smile and tell them it happened one quiet day at a time, one prayer at a time, one act of trust at a time, one ordinary morning after another, until you suddenly realize I have been carrying you all along. That is often how my faithfulness is discovered, not in one unforgettable moment, but in thousands of quiet moments that slowly become impossible to ignore. So if today still feels ordinary, do not lose heart. If your circumstances still appear unchanged, do not assume my hands are still. The silence you hear is not empty. It is often the sound of preparation. The waiting you fear is not wasted. It is a place where unseen foundations are being laid. Your silent prayers have not disappeared into heaven without purpose. They have become part of a story that is still being written. And before this message is over, I want to show you one final truth that changes everything. Why the answer to your deepest prayer has never depended on how perfectly you prayed, but on the unchanging faithfulness of the one who has been listening from the very beginning. There is a burden you have been carrying that you were never created to hold by yourself. It is not only the burden of unanswered prayers, it is the burden of believing that everything depends on you. You are convinced yourself that if you pray a little harder, perhaps I will answer. If you become a little more faithful, perhaps the breakthrough will finally come. If you stop making mistakes, perhaps heaven will finally open the door you have been knocking on for so long. Slowly, without realizing it, you turn prayer into performance. You began measuring your relationship with me the way the world measures achievement. More effort, more discipline, more perfect words, more flawless faith. And when the answer did not arrive as quickly as you expected, you quietly assumed the problem must be you. Perhaps I was disappointed. Perhaps I expected more. Perhaps I had grown tired of hearing the same request. But listen carefully to what I want your heart to understand. I have never loved you because you prayed perfectly. I have never stayed near you because you never struggled. I have never answered your prayers because your performance earned my attention. I loved you before you knew how to pray, before you opened your Bible for the first time, before you understood grace, before you even knew my name. Nothing about my love began because of your perfection. So nothing about your weakness has the power to end it. You keep looking at your failures. I keep looking at my promises. Those are two very different places to build your future. There are people listening to these words who secretly believe they have disappointed me too many times. You still come to church. You still read scripture. You still whisper prayers before sleeping. But somewhere deep inside, there's a quiet voice saying, God must be tired of forgiving me. That voice has never belonged to me. The enemy has always enjoyed making my children believe they must earn what I have already chosen to give freely. Grace has never been a reward for the strong. It has always been a home for the weary. You are not standing before a judge waiting for an excuse to reject you. You are standing before a Father who has been watching the road, waiting for you to lift your eyes and realize you were never walking alone. Think about the story of the prodigal son. The son rehearsed a speech before returning home. He planned every sentence, every apology, every explanation. He believed he needed the perfect words before facing his father. But while he was still far away, his father was already running toward him. The embrace happened before the explanation. Love reached him before the speech was finished. That story was never only about one young man. It has always been about every child who believes they must become worthy before coming home. Some of you have been rehearsing speeches in your own heart. Lord, I'm sorry I doubted. Lord, I'm sorry I became discouraged. Lord, I'm sorry I stopped praying for a while. Do you know what I have been waiting to say? My child, Come home. You never had to own your place here. You imagine me standing with crossed arms. I have been standing with open hands. You imagine disappointment. I offer compassion. You imagine distance. I offer my presence. This is why your silent prayers still reached me, because they never depended on polished words. They depended on a relationship that my love established long before your fears tried to question it. There is another burden I want you to lay down today. The burden of believing you must carry tomorrow before it arrives. You have spent hours worrying about conversations that have not happened, bills that have not arrived, diagnoses you have not received, problems that exist only inside your imagination. Fear always asks you to live in a future that has not happened. Faith invites you to remain with me today. Did I not give Israel manna one day at a time? They could not collect tomorrow's bread today, not because I wanted them anxious, but because I wanted them to discover something greater than bread itself. Daily dependence. Every sunrise became another reminder that my provision had not failed. Perhaps you have been asking me for enough strength to survive the next 5 years. I am offering enough grace for today. Tomorrow will bring tomorrow's mercy. Today's mercy is already here. Look back over your own life. There were moments you were absolutely certain you would not survive. Yet somehow, here you are. Not because you were stronger than everyone else. Not because you figured everything out. But because my hand remained beneath you, even when you could no longer feel it. That same hand has not moved. It has not grown weaker. It has not forgotten your name. It has not become distracted by someone else's story. The one who counted the hairs on your head has not lost track of the tears on your face. Every silent prayer, every sleepless night, every trembling breath, every moment you thought you were walking alone. I was already there before you arrived. And perhaps the greatest miracle is not that your prayers reached heaven. It is that heaven had already come near to you long before you realized I was listening. Stay with me, because in the next part, I want to reveal one final promise. Why the answer you have been waiting for begins not with changed circumstances, but with the unchanging truth that I have never stopped working for your good, even in the silence. My beloved child, if you remember only one thing from everything I have spoken to you today, let it be this. Your silent prayers reached me long before your doubts did. The enemy wanted you to believe that because heaven was quiet, heaven was empty. But silence has never meant absence. Silence has often been the place where my greatest work begins. Look back over your life for a moment. There were seasons you thought would destroy you. There were nights you believed morning would never come. There were prayers you whispered with tears instead of confidence. And yet, you are still here. Not because every problem disappeared. Not because every question received an immediate answer. But because my hand never stopped holding yours, even when you could no longer feel it. That is my promise to you today. I am not asking you to pretend that your pain never existed. I am not asking you to ignore the disappointments that still ache inside your heart. I know every one of them. I know the names you still pray for. I know the dreams you quietly buried because hoping became too painful. I know the conversations you replay in your mind. I know the mistakes you wish you could erase. I know the nights when your faith felt smaller than your fear. And still, I have never stopped calling you my child. Never once. There has never been a single morning when I looked at you and decided my mercy had finally run out. There has never been a single prayer that reached my heart and was ignored because it was too simple, too emotional, too broken, or too late. I have collected every tear. I have heard every whisper. I have understood every silence. Even the prayers you could never put into words were fully understood by me. So stop believing that your future depends on how perfectly you pray. Your future rests in my faithfulness, not in your perfection. Remember what my word declares in Romans 8 verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who are being called according to his purpose. Notice what that verse does not say. It does not say that all things are good. Some seasons are painful. Some losses are real. Some nights leave scars that only heaven completely understands. But I am able to take even those broken pieces and weave them into something beautiful in ways you cannot yet imagine. Nothing you surrendered to me has been wasted. Not your waiting, not your tears, not your disappointments, not even your failures. Because I am a God who brings life out of barren places, hope out of despair, and purpose out of pain. One day you will look back and realize that while you were asking, Lord, where are you? I was already arranging people you had not met yet, opening doors you could not see, closing paths that would have led to heartbreak, strengthening your character for blessings that required a stronger foundation, preparing answers before you even realized the questions were changing. You thought heaven was still. Heaven was moving all along. So when this message ends and your ordinary day begins again, carry this truth with you. When fear whispers that nothing is changing, remember that roots grow before fruit appears. When doubt tells you your prayers were ignored, remember that I hear the cries no one else notices. When discouragement says you have waited too long, remember that my timing has never failed, even when it seems slow. And when another difficult night arrives, and some nights still will, do not measure my presence by your emotions. Measure it by my promises, because my promises do not change with your circumstances. They do not weaken when your faith feels small. They do not disappear when the road becomes difficult. They remain, just as I remain. So today, leave your worries with me. Leave your unanswered questions with me. Leave the future you cannot control with me. You were never meant to carry tomorrow alone. Walk one step at a time. Trust one day at a time. Pray one prayer at a time. And let me carry what you cannot, because I have never asked you to hold the weight of your life by yourself. I have only asked you to trust the one whose hands are strong enough to hold it for you. If this message spoke to your heart, write this declaration in the comments. Lord, I trust your timing. And if someone came to your mind while listening, someone who has been praying in silence, waiting for hope, or carrying a burden they rarely speak about, share this message with them. It may become the reminder they have been praying for. May my peace guard your heart. May my presence strengthen your soul. May my light guide every step you take. And may you never forget this simple, unchanging truth. Your silent prayers reach me, and I am still working, even now,